That life you always wanted, but you didn't know. 'Cause you didn't know.
Hello and welcome to the Kalamazoo Church of Christ podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We're a startup church we just planted in September 2020. And at the Kalamazoo Church, we believe that Christianity is done best when it is done together. And so if you live in the Kalamazoo area, we would love to connect. Be it coming to a Sunday service, one of our small groups, or even just grabbing coffee with a member to learn more. You can visit kalamazoo.church in order to do that. We pray that you are inspired by what you hear today. We had so much fun yesterday, didn't we? Oh, yeah. Those that were able to join, it was a time I hadn't had the fortune of spending time with Ira Butler. I didn't have the fortune of spending time with him. Just yesterday was the first time we had spent any length of time, and I'm like, man, this guy is crazy. I told him, man, you're crazy in the best possible way. And so, we had so much fun with you guys to be able to share. You guys inspire us. It's inspiring to see the group and how much prayers have been, given and just even support, certainly financially. But then I feel like there's so much help that the Kalamazoo has from churches and Grand Rapids Church, Lansing Church, and Detroit Church, all of those, it really feels like that we're the little baby right now, and then one day we won't be a baby, but right now we're the baby, and we're given to so much, so we're super grateful. So thank you guys so much for coming. It means so much. Amen. God is moving. God is moving. So we're kind of, I don't know if you guys are done with it, but in some ways, I feel really excited to start a new focus and maybe whatever. So over the last 4 months, we've been looking at selflessness and how we can first really identify the selfishness in our hearts and then begin along the path to fight that and combat that with selflessness, thinking about ourselves less. And I feel challenged just about every time I put together something like this. I certainly feel challenged when stuff is shared, but I am pretty excited to switch on to the next theme and then the next little focus. And so if you're in that boat, that's okay. 2 more weeks though is what I'm saying. Okay, so there's 2 more weeks, and then we'll go to something else, right? That's what I mean to communicate. We're looking at parables this month. Joel led us last Sunday. And then we're going to look at another one right now. We're actually going to look at probably maybe the first or second most well-known parable. And so this is how I'm going to prove that point. What parables do you guys think is the most talked about of the parables? There's 2 that I think about in particular, and this is a conversation now. So I'm actually asking, what do you guys think? Sower, yes, absolutely. That's one. Yes, absolutely. And so this is one of those 2. And now here we go. This is where it's really like Bible students right now. So we said Luke 15 is the memory scripture for the week. So would that be prodigal son or sower? Bingo. We're at prodigal son. There you go. So you guys just talked. You guys have the lesson already deep implanted in you, right? So there you go. That's the lesson for today. We can pray and head home. No. This is a difficulty with anything that we've heard so many times, and certainly we've heard it in our relationship with God prior to coming into this church, or maybe even prior to getting super deep with God. We've heard about the parable of the lost son, or the parable of the loving father, or the prodigal son. We've heard about it so frequently, and so I just want to ask that we challenge ourselves this morning to try as much as we can to look at it with fresh eyes and to be able to pull stuff out of it. There's a few things we'll identify today, but I think there's so much that there's more there than even what we can talk about just in this time. And so whatever you pull out of it, and that's awesome. We're in Luke 15, and really as we think about, there we go. The big takeaway today is just in our quest to deepen our relationships with God, we need to strive to come to him with the proper view of his love for us. And you think about what the proper view looks like. How many of us, how many have glasses or contacts? That's over half. And I should have glasses, but there was some point when during picture day between 6th and 7th grade, I decided I'm not wearing glasses for picture day, and I stopped wearing glasses from that point on. And so some would say that's why I'm not a Division I basketball player. That's why I play Division III basketball. That's why Spencer beats me in one-on-one from time to time. That's always going to be my excuse, though, is that I just can't see properly. And so I'm never going to get contacts because then I don't have an excuse when Spencer does beat me. Amen. The title of the lesson is The Proper Perspective. And if we're going to view God's love in the proper way, I think we can pull so much from this story, really apply it to our lives. Got a couple of points for us this morning. Jesus is preaching right now. And the reason why he says he's preaching is that he's preaching to a group of people, the sinners and the tax collectors. These were the people that were looked down upon by everybody. Tax collectors were traitors, essentially, and sinners. This would have been outward sin that was obvious to all. Certainly we are all sinners, but this was the outward obvious sin. And eating with them would have looked like I condone what they stand for. I'm with them and we're one. And so he's doing that, and the Pharisees are looking down on him. And so these three, there's three different, there's the parable of the lost sheep, lost coin, and then there's this parable of the lost son. And we're gonna read it right now, and it gets bigger and more exaggerated the further we go. The first point for us this morning is don't sell it short. So we're gonna pick up here. It's in Luke 15 and verse 11. It says, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth on wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have prepared or have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Okay, stop here. So we're told this story, and it's painted, even as Jesus is telling it, almost cartoony. It would have been crazy to look at your father and say, Father, give me my half. That's just as good as saying, hey, you're dead to me. I don't want to have anything to do with you, and I'm gone. And his father, instead of saying, son, that doesn't make any sense, his father says, okay, here you go. And it says he divided it up. And then he goes on, and I don't know how you spent money when you were, I don't know how old this guy is, when you were just getting out of the house. I don't know how you spent money. Maybe you spent it very responsibly, or maybe you spent it on Jordans and clothes and trying to finance a new car, or whatever you spent it on, going out, X, Y, and Z. But this guy, if you were in the good camp of spending properly, this guy was not in that camp. And I'd venture to say perhaps many of us were not in the good camp of spending when they first left, right? And so there's money given. He spends it lavishly. And he ends up in this spot. And he's saying, man, I just want to eat what the pigs would eat. This would have been the most disgusting thing. Pigs were an unclean animal. They wouldn't have been, the Jews didn't even eat pigs. This is disgusting. This is gross. I just want to eat what they're eating. They would have been eating this, I think it's pronounced carob or something. It's carob pod. It's actually, with all the health stuff that we've gotten into, it's actually gained a bunch of popularity over the last 10 years because it's a substitute for gluten and low-fat foods. It kind of helps the starchiness of it. I don't really understand all the details, but It would have been something that tasted kind of okay, but it was just in the long run not something that you'd want to eat very much of. It was something literally that was used to fatten pigs. It was known as the cheapest and most accessible food. It was just what it was known as in that time. He said, man, I just want to eat what these guys are eating. And so what he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my father. And this speech, it actually has the perception of humility, doesn't it? So I'm going to come to my senses. I know that my father, there's food to spare. So this is my speech I'm going to share with them. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Just make me like a hired servant. And he has this speech prepared in his head that this is what I'm going to say. These are the words I'm going to say. And it sounds humble, I think. I'm coming to my senses. I'm going to go and talk to my father. But work with me here. I believe this son has totally sold his father's love short. It says when he came to his senses, he realized he's no longer worthy. If you say you're no longer worthy, it would mean to say that at one point you were worthy. These senses, whatever senses, this is not. He's selling his father's love short. And you think about in our relationships with God, I would say all too often it can turn into a transactional type of connection. That I really, God, I've done this thing, and so I'm going to work my way back up to a good spot. I'm not worthy anymore, God, but I'm going to work my way, and then maybe one day I'll be able to sit at the table again. And sit with me here. I think that's insulting. I think that's insulting to God, but I think, and the reason why I think it's insulting to God is because it'd be insulting to you and me if that happened. You know, in college, from the time I was a junior and senior, I spent a bunch of time. I lived in a brother's household. So there was a bunch of guys. At any given point, it was how many? I guess it was 3 bedrooms. But at any given point, we'd have between 5 and 8 guys living in this house. Okay, and so 8 guys. It was very difficult, but you realize rent was very cheap, and so it's kind of the give and take, right? You're like, I know that nothing I have is my own, and I need to throw away everything, but rent's $115 a month, so you kind of make it work. You know what I'm saying? And in this brother's house, we just had a rule that unless it was meat, everyone's food is everyone's. You just eat it, and the assumption though is that you're going to replace it. And we felt like it. We just sat down and talked. We felt like it was almost disrespectful to our relationships with one another if we put our names on breads and had 4 different loaves of bread sitting out. And we felt like it was disrespectful, and it would take up too much kitchen space in the fridge to put our names on all of our 2% milks. And same thing with cereal. Cereal was give and take. There'd be some names on cereal. I do have to confess that, but. Eggs, all that, and really what would happen is there'd be times, I remember I'd come home from a long day doing X, Y, and Z in school, then I'd come back and I'd look and all my eggs were gone. For dinner, I'm eating eggs, and all of them are gone. And it's a little bit, that's unfortunate. Hey, who ate my eggs? Oh, I did. I'm going to get them the next day. And it's like, okay, I'll find something else. And you just make it work. But we felt like it was insulting to the relationship to make it some kind of transaction that I got you next time. It was assumed you got me next time because I had you this time. Think about if you go and you buy food with somebody, you're going with your friend, and you forget your wallet, let's say. Not on purpose, let's say you forget your wallet, okay? I hope you guys are not those people. I don't know you to be those people, but who, I don't know, maybe you are. You forget your wallet, and somebody, you say, I forgot it, can you pay? And even saying, I got you next time, well, of course you got me next time because we're friends. And I'm not keeping a ledger of every time that I got you and every time you got me because we're friends. There's a relationship there that doesn't involve any kind of transaction. Hear me now, and me and Bianca, when we go out to eat, whoever's credit card gets pulled out first, the same money pot. Where it doesn't matter. I don't tell Bianca, hey, I got you next time, Bianca. So in our relationships with God, though, I fear too often we say, God, I got you this next time. I'm going to come in a place where I know I'm unworthy, and I'm going to work my way back up, God. Where are you selling God short this morning? Where are you selling his love short this morning? You know, I think about this lived out, and I actually really want to take a moment to recognize a guy who, over this last few months, I think has really grown and fought through this sense of wanting to be right and wanting to be in a right relationship with God based on what he does. And actually, Gavin has I've seen you change entirely. I think many of us know Gavin, but he decided just seriously in the last 4 months, from barely a believer to maybe not a believer to full on, all in Christian. And it's been inspiring to see. So much of it was Gavin coming, and his heart, you guys talked to him a little bit, his heart is so soft. He said, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And I just don't deserve it. I say, that's a good spot to be. You're right. You don't deserve, but the response is not to then try to earn it. The response is to say, I don't deserve it. This guy, he was never worthy to be called the son of this awesome father. And yet the father just says, no, you're my son. Hear me now. There's whole denominations of Christianity that get this entirely wrong. There's whole denominations, and we can go deep in depth, and there's this confession that occurs, and then this is how to mitigate this sin that you have in your life, and you say these words in the right way, and then you go to the next, and then you're good again. And we hear that, and it hurts us, doesn't it? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And yet, I just want to challenge us that we'd be pretty foolish to assume that it doesn't happen in our day-to-day lives as well. That if this is how many of us grew up knowing Christianity, or many of us see Christianity lived out, then we can't be those that say, well, we don't struggle with that. It's in our DNA, I would say, as Americans, that there's a transaction that takes place with God. The transaction is always, I just don't have enough, God. You have to do the rest. Let's keep reading here. It's kind of the end of verse 20. It says, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. While he was still a long way off, and you guys have an image of this in your head. In my image, they didn't have rocking chairs back in the day, I don't assume. And they didn't have porches. Maybe they did, I don't know. But I picture a father on a wood porch, and he's rocking. And I wonder if every day he's looking for his son. There's going to be a time when he comes back. I love my son, and I know he doesn't have all that it takes. I know that God wants him back, and I'm sure he's praying for his son. And then there's a time he sees his son a long way away. I'm sure his heart skipped a beat. There was joy and there was excitement. There wasn't any thought of how humiliating it would have been. And it would have been humiliating to pull up his robes and start running. This would have been inappropriate. It was seen as so counterculture to be able to, so immodest to show yourself in that way, that really what the father was doing was he was humiliated by his son, right? When the son decided to leave, he was the talk of the town that, and this guy, his son left him, and he actually called him dead. And so in order to begin reconciling his son, he had to do something that was even more humiliating than what had been done to him. That would be accepting his son back with open arms for all of the town and the townspeople, the area, to see that this guy, he's crazy. He's psycho. He is something different. And you think about then this interaction that takes place, and the son has this speech perfectly prepared, doesn't he? I wonder on the whole trip home, he's trying to recite the right words and what can I say and what kind of posture do I have to bring? And he gets about halfway through and we don't read the ... but the ... is right there. He doesn't even finish his sentence, and the father says, nonsense. Get the servant here. We're going to have a feast. We're going to celebrate. This is the love that the Father has for us. It's not something that we are going to earn. It's not something that we deserve. We are not worthy to be called his sons and daughters, and the Bible says that's what we are. The Pharisees would have heard this, and the first two stories they would have understood. It was about wealth, essentially. The sheep, they bring in enough money, and so if you lose one, you got to find it. The second story of the lost coin, what I understand is the people a lot of times would carry money or their entire wealth on themselves just to ensure that it doesn't get taken or that they lose it. They know where they went last and they can find it very quickly instead of storing it away. And so this woman lost something very valuable to her, and so she goes and finds it, and she's like, we're excited. The Pharisees understood that, and yet as it relates to our relationship with God, it was something that went right over their heads. This morning, I don't know how you're feeling. If you feel like you've done enough to earn God's love, the answer is you haven't. And if you feel like I'm so far from earning God's love, I would say you're on the right path. There's a little more to go, though, and that's embracing what God has in store for us. Second, final point is don't give yourself too much credit. We'll keep reading here. In this story, it should have a beautiful ending. It should end right there with there being an enormous celebration, but it doesn't. It says in verse 25, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father's killed the fattened calf because he has come back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And so this should be a beautiful ending, and yet we understand it is not. This older brother who hasn't done much wrong, according to him, he said, I've always followed what you've said. We understand can't always be true, but the father doesn't even argue with him. And you think about this awesome celebration that's going on, the joy that the father has, and then the selfishness of this older son comes in and he butts in. He says, Father, you give freely to this guy. I've done so much more for you. Surely I've earned way more. I picture the father, that all of the joy that was in his heart, it's so conflicted now, wouldn't it be? Where there's these two competing individuals that I want to celebrate with my son. This is a joyous time. I thought he was dead, but then the older son, I don't want him just to be left in the cold either. And there's this battle and this fight. I read this and I see that this older son has given himself way too much credit, right? And this is the part that would have struck the Pharisees. The first two parables in this little section, they would have understood. They might have even stamped and co-signed. And yet this is where it all gets flipped on its head. And the image, again, that I get is this anger is now welled up to overflowing. And he was the lost son is these tax collectors and sinners, and we are these people who decided that we've earned something amazing. You know, it's really cool. So I was doing a little bit of research on this just this week, and there's a strong connection between the prodigal son or the lost son and the story of Jacob and Esau. And so you maybe understand the story, or maybe just briefly, it's worth reading this week if you've not read it, or you haven't read it recently. But basically, these two individuals, there's Jacob and there's Esau, and early time on, we learn that Jacob is the guy and Esau is not going to be the guy, although Esau is the older son. And the image that's painted that we get of Esau is this brute, hairy guy who goes out and he's a doer, but he's not much of a thinker. And he essentially, at one point, he sells his birthright. At another point, Jacob kind of swindles not only his birthright, but then his blessing. And so there's this huge conflict, actually, and Jacob's in the wrong. And years go by, and then there's this point when they're about to interact. And so the Pharisees had all of this back knowledge. And so when Jesus is telling this story, there's a connection. It's Luke 15:20. It says, and he arose, came to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. It's a parallel. When they would have read that, when they would have heard Jesus say it, they would have understood he's talking about Esau. And it says, Jacob himself went on before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Esau's a guy that was maligned in that time. He was viewed as who not to be. It even says, it's in Hebrews 12:16, it just says, see that no one is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son. The Bible's saying, hey, don't let anybody be godless like him. And yet Jesus is saying, hey, that guy that you feel like is horrible, that even in your oral tradition you speak so poorly of, at least in this area, you don't even match up. And it would have hit the Pharisees. We thought we were good, and yet this guy that we talked down about so much is better than us. That's what he's saying. And then again, this is another cool little connection. I thought it was really interesting, and it's the comparison between the prodigal son and Pharaoh and Joseph. It says in Luke 15:22 and 23, but the father said to his servants, bring quickly the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet, bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. This is Pharaoh, the guy who is an idol worshiper for so often. And there's many more than a few pharaohs that talked about in the Bible, but the guy that's looked down upon so much as the image of what we are fighting against. And certainly in many ways he was. And yet this is the connection made in Genesis 41 through 43. It says, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot, and they called out before him, bow the knee. And so these Pharisees would have heard that, and they would have heard these two phrases, and they would have been frustrated that Jesus is looking at them and saying, you guys are falling so short. You think you've earned something, and yet you haven't earned anything. You talk down about these individuals, and yet they are more spiritual. At least in this area, they're more spiritual than you are. They're able to understand where they stand before God better than you are. You know, I remember there's been more than a few times that I wouldn't call myself the favorite of the kids. There's me and my sister. She's a couple years younger, and I felt like for most growing up, I had a little bit more privileges, but with the privileges and freedom also meant that when I got in trouble, I actually got in trouble. When my sister got in trouble so frequently, she gets grounded, and then after about a day, she was ungrounded. You're grounded this whole week. And then after a day, comes home, my dad just says, Ronnie, are you really sorry for what you did? She said, yeah, I'm really sorry. It's okay, you're not grounded anymore. And I'm like, dude, if this, you never tell me that. And actually, and this is really and actually, I don't talk back to you, Dad. I wasn't the model citizen at school all the time in my speech, but I didn't talk back to my father. And I'm like, Dad, if I said the things that she said to you, I don't want to know what would happen to me. And I remember him saying, what I do with Ronnie and what I do with you is different, and that's okay. Now, it's not equal is not always fair, and fair isn't always what's equal. I remember it hit me. So I want to ask us this morning, what do you feel like you've earned in your relationship with God? Have you earned salvation? Have you earned an opinion? Have you earned a place at the table to talk about this person, that person, or the other? Have you earned a good job? Have you earned great friendships? Have you earned an awesome spouse and loving children? What have you earned as it relates to your relationship with God? As I think about how to combat this stuff, it's putting on the glasses the right way, but so much of the verbiage ought to be, and it's used so frequently, but hear me now, is just this idea of being blessed by God. When good things happen, we are so blessed. We say, how are you? How are you? Man, I'm blessed. How are you? Oh man, it's been a blessing. And I've heard it and I've said it. And so, oh man, this is what a great place to be. Oh yeah, God has blessed me. And then I say that with my words, and then you start thinking about all the ways that I've saved money and all the sacrifices that I've made in order to put myself in whatever this position is. Instead of just saying, no, we're blessed. You think about your relationship, if you're in a dating relationship, your spouse, however you figure, even your friendships, and say, no, it's a blessing to be a part of this group, but then I'm a pretty nice guy. I'm actually a pretty loving dude. Anyone would want to get along with me. It'd be shame on them if they don't. You know what I'm saying? And let us not be those people, though, right? We've done nothing to earn it. Don't give ourselves too much credit. And so I hope upon looking at this lesson, we can put on the proper perspective. We can have the right set of glasses that sees that we aren't worthy, but instead of going to a place of saying we're not worthy, just decide we're going to serve anyways. We're going to let God decide who's worthy and who's not. I'm just here to serve him. We don't get to a spot of saying we've been a Christian 15, 20, 25 years, and so I've got a place at the table. We can say I've been a Christian 15, 20, 25 years, and I hope it's 50, 15, 20, 25 more. Amen. Awesome. Right now, we are going to have one final song, and then we'll be dismissed. Thank you so much for listening to the Kalamazoo Church of Christ podcast. If you're in the Kalamazoo area, we'd love to get connected. Please go to kalamazoo.church and fill in your information to come to a Sunday service or any other event that we have going on. In any case, you'll be hearing from us next week.
Saving souls.